Greetings, fellow barbarians. It is I, Alan Odinson, and you are listening to the Barbarian Lounge podcast. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. Got a pretty interesting episode for you. This is going to be part of our ongoing prepper series that we introduced a while back. Those episodes are running right now on the network of UCY, which that's a nice segue into reminding you that every Tuesday night from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., the Barbarian Lounge is on UCY.TV. They're replaying a lot of our older shows right now just to help let everybody get caught up to find out exactly what we're about. But you can check them out there. There's a live chat that goes on during the podcast. You can tune into that, talk to other people about the show. I try and pop in there whenever I can make it to the chat room to communicate with everybody. But please show them some support. Also, those episodes are automatically uploaded to YouTube, so you can sit at home while you're working. If you've got a TV in your office, you can pop onto YouTube and catch the Barbarian Lounge episodes there from UCY.TV. So check them out on YouTube as well as on the website for UCY.TV. Also, you can check the Barbarian Lounge out at at thebarbarianlounge.podbean.com. You can check us out there. Give us a subscription, give us some comments, give us some ratings. All these things help our website grow. Also, you can find us on iTunes. Go there, leave a review. All these things are going to help the Barbarian Lounge continue to grow so we can get a bigger audience and we can spread our message across the globe. Right now we are picking up like crazy. I am so happy. Been getting a lot of positive feedback and positive reviews from people. All those people who have not given positive reviews, they were probably assholes anyway. So please, check us out there. You can go to Facebook. Go to Facebook and find the Barbarian Lounge on Facebook at the Barbarian Lounge Podcast. Give us a like there. You can keep track of everything that we're doing. If you want to send us a message with any ideas for different topics for the show, you can do so there as well. If you just want to call and tell me I'm an asshole, you can do that too. So just message us there at the Barbarian Lounge Podcast on Facebook. Also, want to talk about our sponsor. Our sponsor today will be a shameless plug for my business, Odinson Archery. You can check it out, OdinsonArchery.com. You can go there. We make traditional bows from non-traditional products. You can go there and get some of the best, finest, high-quality, affordable archery equipment that is on the market today. We've got quivers. We've got bows of all different designs, styles. Some of the bows of legend that have been used by conquerors, tribes of men throughout history are sold at Odinson Archery. You can get Comanche bows, Mongolian bows, different style Mongolian bows, Japanese Yumi bows, all kinds of different styles, even our takedown bows as well as our unique Valkyrie style bow. So go to Odinson Archery, check it out there. I also want to mention our arrows. We've got bodkin tip arrows are back in stock. Yes, the bodkins are back in stock. Those are the original armor-piercing rounds. You can pick those up there. Pick up our razor broadheads that we have for sale through Odinson Archery, as well as our custom-fletched carbon arrows that are some of the best carbons you will find out there for any sort of traditional shooting. So please, check out OdinsonArchery.com. So today, folks, as far as our prepper series goes, we're going to be discussing some different scenarios through a medium I like to employ with people whom I train with, people whom I communicate with. We're going to be discussing different survival scenarios and different thought processes that go into meeting such scenarios through a game. It's technically a card game known as Conflicted. They have a lot of these different decks. I've got several of the decks. And basically, the way Conflicted goes is it gives you different scenarios for different sort of survival, prepping, disaster type situations. And you have to, you draw a card, you read the scenario, and each person in the group elaborates on how they would meet this scenario and gives different options of how it should be handled, maybe some things that aren't really talked about in the card, so it just really opens everybody in the group's mind, and it also is a great way to understand the type of people you're with. An excellent way of weeding people out. People in the group who may not have the same mindset as you, people in the group who just aren't there. Maybe they're on a different moral standing that you are. Maybe they're higher, maybe they're lower, we don't know. But it's always this is a good measuring stick. But I'm going to read the card that came with it here, so it kind of gives you an idea. It says, what conflicts you? Our game is named Conflicted because these questions challenge us to choose between our existence and our morals. The goal is to explore how far people will go in order to survive. Can you keep your morality, or even your humanity, when your survival is on the line? We hope that our game can help you start the conversation with your loved ones and help you reflect on all aspects of preparedness and self-reliance. And this is something I've been talking about just with some friends and people I would consider members of or prospecting members of my group. These are some of the things we talk about in the realms of prepping. There's a lot of people that use a lot of flowery language to demonize guys who are into prepping or who are into general preparedness. You know, oh, are you wearing a tinfoil hat on your head? Or, oh, you think aliens are going to get us? Or is there going to be a zombie apocalypse? All this cliche bullshit that they picked up off of TV. I've always contended that shows like Doomsday Preppers, while it did do a bit of good to help people get the idea that they need to start prepping, for the most part, that show did nothing but demonize people who follow a mindset of preparedness. And that was the goal. I think that was always the goal. Any legit preppers that were on the show or shot episodes for the show that actually had sense about what they were doing and wasn't just completely outrageous or thinking about ridiculous scenarios, those types of shows never made it to air. One I could think of in particular, because I followed it while they were shooting it, because he kept a pretty good dialogue and journal of it, was James Yeager, when his group with Tactical Response did a specific episode for Doomsday Preppers, and they pulled that episode. And why did they do that? It's because they had their shit together. You had well-trained people, former military, former law enforcement, who did not come off as these crazy kooks like they wanted. That's what they wanted with that show. It's the same with that Doomsday Castle bullshit that was on several years ago. That Doomsday Castle is actually located here in South Carolina. Matter of fact, I used to have the GPS coordinates for it, and it doesn't really do a whole lot of good when you advertise your supposed Doomsday Castle, and I can punch into Google Map and get an aerial view of your location. So, way to go, guys. But the whole idea with shows like that was to demonize this mindset of being a prepper. And people have been prepping for years. This is not something that magically just appeared. It was given a name of prepper. But I remember growing up that my grandparents always had a room built onto the side of the house that was full of canned foods, powdered milk. All these things were rotated. And that's because they grew up during a time of depression when these things were not readily available. For some reason, I guess because for the most part, America's had it good for most years. It's been a long time since people have been starving. They've depended on the government to take care of them, which, let me tell you right now, if you don't think that train's about to derail, it's coming. So all of you people that are sucking off the government teat, it's coming. But a lot of people just aren't used to the fact of having to have stuff stored back because one day that food may not be there. But this is something people have understood for years. Even our ancestors going way back, they understood this because it was not somebody to take care of them. I've said it before, and I will continuously say that if you depend on the government to take care of you, you are nothing more than a pet. And what happens when that owner no longer wants to take care of that pet? It's put out in the yard and it's probably going to starve, or it's given away, or it's given to a shelter. You can put that into whatever perspective you want to. So, the government themselves right now, even though they have this full game of demonizing the idea of prepping. The government themselves is prepping. They've been prepping forever. They've got massive seed vaults in the sides of mountains and all of this gear stored away just in case. Just in case for what? And a lot of people think that if you're prepping, it has to be for something massive, like there's going to be some disaster where zombies are going to rise out the grave, or the New World Order is going to take over, whatever sort of idea they want to throw out there, or aliens are going to come down, whatever. The fact of the matter is, prepping is just good common sense. Having a go bag, and I had a conversation with somebody about a go bag a while back, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. Just depends on what cards I draw. I've got a 52 card deck here that I'm just going to randomly draw from. We're going to go from there. But you need to have a go bag. You need to have preparations for your family. Because something as simple as a house fire, a earthquake, say you've got the New Madrid fault line, you've got the San Andreas fault line. If one of these things were to go, can you imagine the devastation we would have? Something like a solar flare. A solar flare can come through here and wipe out electronics and put us in under, basically it'll create an EMP effect. And anything that's not inside a Faraday cage is going to be fried, and it'll put us back to the Stone Age instantly. Instantly. I'm not talking about in a couple of weeks. I'm talking about right now. You're listening to this podcast, and all of a sudden it goes, yeah, we're here now. And it goes silent. And it never comes back on. That's what I'm talking about. These things can happen overnight. They can happen right now in a matter of seconds. But people think they're so far removed from this. When you start talking about civil unrest, government tyranny, all these things. The one thing that all these things in history have in common is nobody saw them coming until it was too late. There's always those people that are going to sit back and laugh and point and poke fingers, and that's fine. Those people have always existed. But they're also the ashes that new civilizations are built on. So, with all this talk, let me take a sip of my Mitacon here before I get started. Yeah. Alright, so with all this going on, I've said before that the idea, which I'm going to do an episode on kind of being a lone wolf, just for the sake of there are people that follow that mentality and different strategies they can use. But for the most part, we're talking group dynamics when it comes to survival and prepping. You want to have some sort of group of trusted individuals. And when I say trusted, maybe everybody has a different level of trusted than I do. But for me, a trusted individual is somebody that if I'm talking to them about prepping, they don't go, well, you know, if something happens, I'm just going to come to your house and kill you and take your food. Like it's a fucking joke. Let me tell you something. I don't know about what your level of joking is, but for me, when I'm talking about prepping, even if the guy legitimately believes that is a joke, I know that thought's crossed his mind, and guess what? He's out of here. I'm not going to associate with somebody and have them as part of my inner circle when they joke about things like that, because I know that thought has already entered their mind. Whether it's joking or not, I don't care. That's my personal protocols, and everyone's going to have their own level of that. But for the most part, and the way that this game is going to be mapped out, is we're going to be going along the lines of group dynamics in most of these situations. As I said, I'm not 100% sure exactly what the scenarios are going to unfold here. But I got my cards here. I'm going to shuffle them up a little bit. Alright, cut the deck here. And we are going to draw a card, folks, and we are going to go from there. Card number 1. Alright, I'm going to read this scenario to you, and we'll discuss this. And by all means, when you listen to this show, listen to it with friends, listen to it with your group, and discuss these same scenarios with them. And this will help you to start get an idea of the type of people you're with. And there's going to be, I'm going to discuss different options you'll have in these, and all of these things can be elaborated on. But let's get started here with the first one. It says, your hunting party has been captured by an unknown number of well-armed men and are being held in a well-fortified location. The armed men offer to return your hunting party for half of your food supply. Would you take their offer and avoid losing members of your group, or would you fight and risk everything? How would you handle this situation? Alright, so in this situation, we've had a hunting party that's went out there, and you know they've been captured. Here's a few things that I would consider with how I would respond to this. It says they've been captured by an unknown number of well-armed men and are being held in a well-fortified location. The first prospect, before I even consider how we're going to handle this, is I need to gather intel on these people. I need to gather intel. I need to find out who they are. And I'm not going to have Google at this time, so that's going to mean good old-fashioned intel. You're going to have to go out. You're going to have to perform on-the-ground, boots-on-the-ground intel gathering. You're going to need to see what their location looks like, what type of guards they have, what type of weapons do they have. Do they have nests set up for snipers? What type of rifles are they using? Are the rifles they're using higher power than yours? Is their area vulnerable to fire? Are they vulnerable to being starved out? What sort of situations can I use to gain a tactical advantage over them? Another issue is going to be is you can watch these people and get an idea of their level of training. Now, for some people who have not undergone any sort of training in firearms or even martial arts, I was talking to people about martial arts the other day, and we're talking about how, especially with jiu-jitsu or submission grappling, as soon as you touch somebody, within seconds, you have an idea of what they know. Like, some guys you touch, you're like, oh, this is a fish, I got this guy. And some guys you touch, and within seconds, you're like, oh, shit, I can't do anything with this guy. You start to realize these things through feel. The same thing goes with a certain level of firearms training or weapons training in general. You can see these guys, see how they move, see how they handle their weapons, see how their magazines are positioned in their pouches. A lot of times, little things like that can tell you the type of people you're dealing with. They may have numbers, but they may not be very well trained. That could pose your advantage. Even though they outnumber your group, the possibility now is that they do not have the tactical fortitude to be able to handle the type of pressure you guys are going to put on them. You might have some very good riflemen. You may have some people who are very good at close quarters. All of these things start playing into account. Also understand that they may have to have hunting parties that go out. Where's their water? If they have to go someplace to get their water, what does that tell you about them? That tells you they have to send a party out to get water. What can you do? You can capture their party, and now you got a trade going on. All of these things start playing into account, and this is this sort of outside-the-box thinking that you have to have. Once you gather this sort of intel, then you can really start asking yourself, well, is it worth fighting or not? If you're talking about giving away half your food supply, maybe the part of your hunting party that got captured is the part of your hunting party that's some of your best guys at whatever. Maybe you need them for something. Maybe one of them is one of your best guys in the medical field. Maybe he's a great medic. You need a medic. Maybe you give half your food supply. Maybe you do. For a lot of people, from an ego standpoint, they don't want to have to really think about the fact of surrendering, but it may be necessary at that time. However, just because you surrender on that day does not mean you have to surrender again several days later. What I mean is you come back and take your food supply back. But all of these things you want to take into account. As far as a well-fortified location, I will say this. No matter how well-fortified your location is, it is not, and I repeat, is not impenetrable. I don't care if you have an underground. I talked about this on the Doomsday Marauders episode that just aired on UCY TV last night. Even if you've got an underground bunker, you're in a hole. There's only one way out that hole, and I know that hole has to have some sort of ventilation. And guess where I'm laying siege at? So, how would you handle this situation? I don't know. There's a lot of different options in there. But the first thing for sure is, one, we gather intel. We learn about, two, we're going to learn about what type of skill levels they have. We're going to learn whether or not a direct attack is going to be the best play to make today, or maybe we attack them later after we give them half our food supply and we come back. But understand this. Who knows, when you give them that half food supply, what if? What if they do not return your people and they want more? What if they realize that you're a pushover? These are all things you need to think about. Another thing is, this is where it becomes important, especially with tribes of groups. And when I'm talking prepper groups, I'm speaking tribally here. This is where it's important to have allies as well, because maybe they have a unknown number, which after you pull intel, that should not be an unknown number anymore. You should have an idea about who you're going after. When you gather allies, you can go to your ally and say, look, my hunting party got grabbed here. I'm going to need your help to perform an assault on this location and get our people out of there. You may have to fire a shot. You may have to kill everybody in that other camp. Or you may not. Maybe just the idea of an overwhelming force coming towards them will be enough. If they look out and they see, instead of your tribe of one, they see 2 other tribes. So they got 3 tribes coming in after them. Now the numbers game's against them. Now they don't know, maybe that's all they see. They don't know how many you've got. All these things begin to come into play. And this is where you can start to use strategy to defeat them. Even using some sort of mental strategy where you make your numbers appear larger than they are. This is one of the things that the Swamp Fox during the Revolutionary War was very good at. The Swamp Fox had the ability to use guerrilla tactics, and he would hit the British from all angles, from cover. And they, as far as they were concerned, he had a massive army of guys out there that were taking his leadership out. But the Swamp Fox's unit was always very small. But he created this illusion of being bigger than he actually was. These are also tactics you can employ. So my advice on this, if it was me, I gather intel, find out how many people I'm dealing with, I weigh my allies about how many people will join my cause, and then we go from there. Until those 3 things are weighed in, you can't even begin to discuss how you're going to handle something like that. So next card, I'll pull another one out here. Your family has been without food for quite some time now, and things are beginning to look bleak. You stumble upon a group of people who are friendly enough to barter goods with you. They have a small supply of food that they are willing to trade, but will only accept your only firearm as payment, since this is all you have of value. How would you react to this situation, and what would you do? Well, in this situation, first off, I have to tackle the first part of this question by saying, why is your family without food? And this is where it goes right back to the whole prepping situation where people, you're a prepper, you must think there's zombies coming. Yeah, there's zombies coming. They're not undead. But trust me, in bad enough situations, zombies are coming. And they are going to want food. Why did you not prepare to have your family ready for such a situation? And I understand certain situations can evolve, such as maybe in whatever happened, maybe you had plenty of preps. An earthquake happened and you lost it all. That's a possibility. But when you're talking about trading your only form of protection for food, there's a big problem there. I've never been one to say I'm going to barter ammunition or barter any sort of weapon, especially ammunition and guns. I'm not the type of guy that says I'll trade you some bullets for some cans of beans. That's not my play, because those bullets may get used against me in the future. I'm not down with that. The only guy I want to have bullets is me. I can't prevent that, but I sure can not aid it as well. So I would say I would not give my food or give my firearm away for food, because when you're talking hierarchy of needs, yes, you need food, but you also need protection as well, especially if it's in a bad enough situation where things have gotten bleak and your family's starving. Well, let's be honest. If we're talking conflicted here, if we're talking about who I owe my loyalty to at this time, I owe it to my people. I don't owe these people anything. If you're hungry enough, would you be willing to take that same firearm and shoot everybody in this small group to have food? We're getting conflicted, right? This is real talk. We're not talking about playing this thing. Do I owe those people anything? Do I know them? Yeah, they're friendly enough. That's great. Well, that's their fault. Right? The doors and let me in. They don't know who I am. They don't know what type of situation I'm in. And this doesn't just go for how I would react, but this also goes in how you would react to other people as well. And the reason being is if you say, well, they seem friendly enough, they just need some food, you do not know their intentions. And you do not owe these people anything. The only thing that you owe, the only individuals you owe anything to is your family and your folk. That's it. Nothing more. Now I know for some people that may seem kind of harsh, but this is real talk here. We're not doing some sort of, I'm being honest with you, this is real talk. So, are they getting my gun? No. They're not going to get the gun. Because as a man, especially if we're talking about my family here, if I'm reading this as a man, my family should not be starving. They're going to eat. One way or another, they're going to eat. As a man, I should be able to provide that for them in whatever way. Providing for your family and your folk is not giving away your protection. That's not it. So, no. They can kiss my ass. They're not getting my gun. That seems simple enough, doesn't it? Alright, next card. Here. Alrighty. It says, a deadly flu outbreak has infected 1/3 of your group, and you do not have the means to quarantine them, or the medicine to help them. Do you vote with the rest of the group to banish them from your group, or do you take it upon yourself to eliminate the infected ones before it spreads any further? What other option would you consider? Well, I would put it this way. If it's a deadly flu outbreak, and I'm going to say that this, if it's considered a deadly, it doesn't say here, but if it's a deadly flu outbreak, I would guess it would be something fatal. Let's say something like a bird flu or some sort of modified flu that will kill people. We don't have the means to treat it, so what do? If you have the right people in your group, people whom should be in your group. I'm not talking these Johnny-come-lately wannabe prepper guys. I'm talking about people you would consider your folk, your family. If you have the right people in your group, you should not have to remove them from the group. They should be willing to remove themselves. Plain and simple. Think about it. I know, I don't even have to ask any questions. I know for a fact that if my wife had this deadly flu that was going to lead to her death, and if there was a high probability that I was going to catch it, that she would remove herself from me to prevent me from getting it, because I would do the same for her. So if you have the right people in your group who care about the group, not just their own selfish needs, and that is the type of people you need in your group. If you have the right people in your group, they will remove themselves. You will not have to eliminate them. They will eliminate themselves. I'm not talking about blowing their brains out. I'm talking about the fact that they will remove themselves and let what happens happen. Plain and simple. That one is not very difficult. As far as any sort of other options to consider, I don't see where there needs to be any other options. The right people will eliminate themselves. And this is where it becomes important to have people in your group whom you trust. People whom I don't have to make this decision. If I'm the leader of the group, I do not have to make this decision. Say, okay, look, you're going to have to go because we can't have people getting sick around. I don't have to do that. If you've got the right people in your group, if you have people in your group that you question as to whether or not they would do that, you need to seriously reevaluate the people that you're planning on working with. I know several tribes of men who are they're probably listening to this right now, and they're saying the same thing. Absolutely. I know for a fact that my guys would not want me to get sick and would not want to infect our tribe, and they would remove themselves. Plain and simple. Take another sip of this Mighty Con. Alrighty. Another card. Alrighty. This one says, the economic collapse has happened. And let me tell you something, folks, before I continue reading. The economic collapse, we're at the beginning of such an economic collapse. I know that the media will tell you that everything is getting better and the world's greater than it's ever been. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. We're teetering on the edge right now, and they don't want you to know. If you follow any sort of economics and you follow the way the stocks go up and down, and yes, that is important even for a barbarian who considers themselves an outsider, someone who's building a tribe outside the system. That is vitally important to understand because you are still in this system. And we still use money. And if the economic collapse hits its full stride and you're not prepared for it, when you haven't put your goods where they need to be, you haven't invested in the proper things, and so all that money that you may have is worthless. So, back to our game here. The economic collapse has happened. The infrastructure is gone and people are getting hungry. Your neighbors are starving and starting to scavenge, looking for food to feed their families. Are you prepared to have what your family needs? How would you keep the stores safe while you consume them and avoid becoming a target? So first off, with the first part of that, the infrastructure is gone and people are getting hungry. The odds of that occurring on a long-term scale would require a major crisis. Let me just go ahead and throw that out there right off the bat. And we're talking about something that's going to affect the whole of a nation, possibly even the whole of a world, in order for something to get that bad. I know a lot of people have these pipe dreams about everything completely collapsing. In order for something like that to happen, we'd have to have almost worldwide chaos. And something like an EMP attack from a solar flare or whatever. I always have heard that if World War III ever begins, it's usually going to start off with an EMP attack. That makes perfect sense to me. But the odds of a solar flare, very high. Very high. And like I said, we could go right back to the Stone Age instantaneously. Barring something like that, the idea of infrastructure completely going under is highly unlikely. Because the system has a wonderful way of rebuilding itself. Now, if the system completely collapses, that's when it gets interesting. Because then you see what's going to... This is where the tribes will start rebuilding. We saw this with Rome especially. When Rome finally fell under, it was the tribes that began to build and renew that sort of society that they were looking for at that time. But people are getting hungry, the neighbors are starving, starting to scavenge, looking for food to feed their families. You're prepared and you have what you need. How would you keep the stores safe while you consume them and avoid becoming a target? First off, this goes back to the conversation I had with a guy about a go bag. If your idea in a horrible disaster is to stay in the city, you are fucking crazy. The city is the worst place you can be. I know, and nobody wants to think about the idea of having to leave the city, and there's plenty of things there, and there's plenty of food. There's also plenty of people. Anywhere there's plenty of people, there's trouble. Think about it. Why are cities some of the worst high crime areas? Because there's such a dense population. When you go into more rural areas like where I live at, crime's very low. And the reason being is there's not a lot of people here. So it's very, very simple. If you have more people, there's more chances of danger. When you start talking about living in areas where there's low income, your ghetto type areas, your place with a lot of homelessness, these types of areas are naturally going to be higher crime areas. When the shit hits the fan, I've said it before, you're either the shit or you're the fan. If you are staying in the city, you're mingling with the shit. Ideally, you want to be someplace where there aren't neighbors. But even for those people who's decided to leave and they're living off in the woods somewhere, understand this: the natural response for people when things get bad will be to leave the city. I know that sounds surprising, but if you look throughout history and other places where there's been collapses, you see a lot of people start migrating from the city, and people just have this natural, ingrained response to run to the woods. Especially in places like I live, in the South especially. A lot of people here grow up, country folk, they're used to living in the woods, living off the land, if you want to say, to a certain extent. So even though you don't have neighbors at the time, pretty soon you could be looking at a massive migration and even worse, a refugee crisis. To where people see this house in the woods and they're like, well, hell, maybe they got some food, maybe they'll help. So you're going to run into issues with people. But for the most part, as I said before, it comes back to who do you owe your allegiance to here? You and your family are prepared. You have what they need. How are you going to keep your stores safe while you consume them and avoid becoming a target? Well, if you're in a highly dense area with people, it's going to be very, very difficult to avoid becoming a target. This is why people have bug-out locations. And I know everybody gets caught up in the whole idea of a bug-out bag, and I've tried to explain it before, but it's one of the most misunderstood ideas out there. A bug-out bag is not the bag that you throw on your back and you go off and live forever off that bag. That is not a bug-out bag. A bug-out bag is a bag that you have to get you from point A to point B. Meaning from your home, point A, to your bug-out location, point B. And then you go from there, because if your bug-out location is where you want to have stores set up. Ideally, you want to have preparations to be able to leave your home. You want to stay as long as possible, but understand that you can only defend that location for so long. You're going to fall into a numbers issue. You're going to fall into running out of supplies. You're going to fall into... Remember I said in the Doomsday Marauders episode, if I'm in the mindset of a marauder and I want to take your shit and you won't let me have it, the next best thing is going to be to burn your place down. Because one, that'll get you to come out, right? They get you to come out. Two, that means you don't get to have it. And it's a moral victory. And you see this a lot throughout history where you see marauders come in and they'll just lay waste to the place. Take a classic example. And I would put him under the label of marauder for sure. Captain Henry Morgan. Yes, Henry Morgan was more than just rum. Captain Henry Morgan, a privateer who worked for the British government at the time. Privateers were basically the contractors for the British, because the British didn't have enough money to really pay for a navy to fight the Spanish in the Caribbean. So what they did was they hired privateers, which were private contractors, to basically steal, rob, loot, pillage, plunder the Spanish. When Henry Morgan invaded Panama, yes, Henry Morgan actually had the gall to invade a country. When he invaded Panama, he hit the area, one of the hubs for Spanish gold and riches and supplies. Well, the Panamanians had word that Morgan was on the way. So what did they do? They left. And they took most of their riches and stuff with them. Well, when Morgan got there, and needless to say, these were all of the richer people of the Spanish. So all the poor people and just normal people, they were left there. They weren't told shit. Go figure, right? Now, whenever something bad happens, understand this. You will be the last to know about it. The government will know far in advance, and you will find out about it last. And they do this to compartmentalize so there's not any sort of mass panic. And you can look at that for however you want to. That's why it's always good to keep an eye on the battlefield, as we've talked about in several episodes already. But when Morgan arrived, he was expecting big riches. So Henry Morgan got there, and all they got was a little small bit of supplies. And Morgan was pissed about it. So what did he do? He burnt Panama to the ground. Yes, he burnt Panama to the ground. If you go to Panama right now and you walk up to people and you say, hey, do you know about Henry Morgan? They're probably going to get a scowl on their face. The legend of Henry Morgan is hated in Panama. So, this is the idea that you have to think about as well. If you're thinking about staying in your home, don't think that you've got some fortified location that cannot be breached. You are incorrect, sir. You're incorrect. They may even turn it into Swiss cheese with firearms. But either way, you cannot defend your location indefinitely. You can't. It will be breached eventually. It may take a while, may take a long time, and you may do a lot there, but it will be breached eventually. So how do you keep these people out? There's several ways you can do it. I've talked about this in the, I think it was our 4th episode, and the very first episode in our prepping series. But I talked about different ways to set your home up. Depending on how many people you have, will decide what sort of defense you use. Plus, it'll depend on your location as well. It's a vast, vast subject. But basically, you got 2 forms of defense, either overt or covert. Overt defense is exactly as it sounds. You have an overt show of force. When people drive by, they see this place and they go, "Holy shit, we do not want to go there, man. There's people on the roofs. There's there's sentries walking around with armor. They got helmets on. There's barbed wire out front. I can see there. Oh my God, that guy's got a 50 cal Barrett up there in the sniper nest." Now, this is a sort of overt defense that you have. A covert defense is basically making your place not look like there's anyone there. You can make it burnt out, make it look like it's been looted, make it look like it's been burnt out. This is one advantage you would have with having an underground bunker at your home, because you can make the inside of your home look completely unlivable, but still be living underneath it. That's always a possibility, but don't think that you can stay there indefinitely as well. The thing with a covert defense is if people come in, this is where you want to have a silenced weapon to be able to stop them so you don't alert others to your presence. Ideally, though, if you're in a situation where people are scavenging and looking for food to feed their families and stuff, understand that they are going to be desperate. All manner of morality is going to be thrown out of the window, because I asked you, and I've asked this numerous times as well, what would you do to feed your starving child? Most people would do anything. Most people do anything to feed their starving dog. So they don't know you. As I said before, they don't know you. They don't owe you anything. They have, just as you do, they have loyalty to their family and their folk and their people. So understand that they're gonna give you the same sort of level of respect in that manner as you would give them, or you should give them. This is where morality starts coming into play as well, and having people in your group who have the same level of morality. Especially when it comes to things like religion, take a highly Christian family. A Christian family is going to, most of the time, believe in some sort of generosity, because that is part of their teaching. They have this level of, give to them, give to those in need, and now some of them aren't, trust me, but there are those that have that idea. If you take my household is a heathen household. Let's just say our philosophy is quite different in that aspect. There are certain people that we owe allegiance to, and there's certain people that we do not. Your level of morality and the people you have in your group, you need to have people in your group that are of a near or close morality as yours, because any sort of conflicts in that level of morality is going to cause conflicts in the group, which you do not need. So in most situations, how would you keep it safe? Overt or covert, one you're going to hide, the other one you're going to shoot people in the face. Pretty simple. Alright, next card here. The banking system in your country has collapsed. Very possible. You have some supplies, but your bank account cannot be accessed for more. There are, however, people who owe you money, and it dawns on you that either you need to collect now in cash or goods, or risk never be paid again. How would you go about collecting debts after the collapse? For the most part, those debts are going to be absolved. Just in the same way, if the banking system collapsed, your debts are going to be absolved. You can't expect after things fall apart to go around collecting debts. If you've got people who owe you money, you've loaned money or goods or whatever to, and they haven't given those back or returned it, and you have to keep going about. Never give money away. And this doesn't just talk about prepping. This is talking about life in general. Never give people something with the expectation of getting it back. If you get it back, great. For the most part, I remember, I don't remember who it was. I want to say it was my father or my grandfather. It was one of the two. Might have been both of them. But I would say, hey, let me borrow X amount of dollars when I was a kid. Let me borrow $5. And they say, no, you can't borrow $5, but I'll give you $5. And this is that idea of not having any sort of expectation. If you expect to get things back, you're not doing it out of your own generosity and your own willing to help other people. So don't expect when things are falling apart to go around and say, hey man, don't you owe me $10? That's asinine. If you do not have your things ready beforehand, you fucked up a long time ago. Plain and simple. Very, very simple. Next card. Is ambushing and equal force fighting against you an intelligent move, or does it make you a less than honorable adversary? So we're talking matters of honor here. First off, if I'm deciding to ambush another force against me, that means they're my enemy. What sort of honor do I owe an enemy? We're talking war here. And this, make no mistake about it, this is war. If I've decided to ambush somebody, that's war. It's kind of like saying if some guy, let's take my daughter's boyfriend. My daughter's boyfriend decides to, she pissed him off one night, he's had a bad day, and he smacks her across the face. Do I owe him an honorable fight? Do I owe him walking up to him and saying, hey, you hit my daughter, and I want you to step outside, we're going to have words? Is that what I owe him? Or do I owe catching him as he goes to take the garbage can out and beating him with a sock with a bar of soap in it? I obviously owe him the last. I don't owe these people a fair fight. You don't owe anybody a fair fight. Fair fights are designated for matters of honor. That's the way I've heard it put. I believe it was Tuan Tom Kyer that I heard worded that way, and I agree with that. A fair fight is owed towards matters of honor. In matters of war, I don't owe you a fair fight. My goal is what? My goal is to go home today. So no, an ambush is an intelligent way. Even if you look back throughout history, you look at some of the forces that fought against Rome, the Germans, the Britons, all of these people, all of these tribes that were fighting back against they weren't fighting against an equal force, they were fighting against a much larger, more dangerous force, and they utilized ambush to their advantage. And you absolutely should. In all manners of things. It's kind of like saying if I'm going out to my vehicle, at night, I'm in a parking lot somewhere, and I'm mine somewhere else. It shouldn't be, but it is. I'm unlocking my door, and a guy walks up behind me and sticks a gun in my face and says, "Give me your wallet." Do I owe him a fair gunfight, or do I parry his gun to the side and pull mine out and shoot him through the dome? That's an ambush, isn't it? He wasn't expecting that. That's smart tactics. That's called tactics. So this isn't a matter of being conflicted. This is a matter of tactics. There's no sort of honor that I need to be gained towards these people. My level of honor, your level of honor in general, is developed in your group by your people. And these people whom you are attacking, they're not your people. Next card. Your last loved one in the world has contracted a deadly disease that can spread to you. To take care of her before she passes would certainly mean your death. But if you don't, no one else will. What would you do in this situation if this happened to you? I've already spoke about this earlier in the same thing. I answered it ahead of time. I would expect, and I know, I don't even have to expect, anybody in my group, especially my wife, whom I love dearly, she loves me dearly, either one of us will remove ourselves from the other to prevent them from dying. That's just common sense. If you're with somebody whom you question that, you need to seriously reevaluate your level of commitment in that relationship. So next card here. You're bugging out by foot and see a crashed prison bus. The inmates are stuck and trying to get out. The bus is on fire and they are begging for help. Do you use your axe to break the windshield glass to let them out, or do you let the inmates die? What do I owe these people? Fuck them. Fuck them. I do not owe. I question sometimes the mindset behind the creation of these cards. Some of these were submitted by people, and I think, how weak are some of the people that submitted these questions? Oh, I'm going to take my axe and bust the window out and let some criminals out. Well, they may just be in there for simple pot possession. Who gives a shit? I don't care what they're in there for. They're in there. They're in there and I'm out here. I do not owe them something. What happens when I let them out? That's the whole point, is you don't know. So why am I going to take my axe to break the glass to let them out? That's idiotic. That's weak. So I don't know. It doesn't say who submitted this question, but if you're listening to this episode, you're a weak pansy ass. If you think that you should bust a glass to let a bunch of prison inmates out in any situation, I don't care. I don't care if it's on the side of the road. I don't owe these people anything. Fuck them. All right. Next card. Do you think physical activity or knowledge will be more valuable to your group in a survival scenario? Who would you rather team up with? A 70-year-old female who knows how to live off the grid but needs almost every physical assistance, or a 28-year-old man who only offers a strong back to your group? It almost seems like a cop-out to say both. You gotta have a level of diversity in skill sets in your group. You do not want a group of Neanderthals who don't know how to fix a car, don't know how to perform basic medical needs, don't know how to grow a garden. You need the tribe is open to a lot of different people when it comes to a prepping group. This is one thing I've always contended. Not everybody in the group has to be a warrior. You don't want everybody in the group to be a warrior. The warrior's job in the group is to protect those people who are the nurturers of that group. If you haven't, I'll plug it here. If you haven't checked out the loyalty matrix from Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, if you haven't checked that out, he really breaks it down very well in there. And MC's a good friend, and he covers all this sort of material. I'm sure he could explain a lot better than I could, but for me, when it comes to the group, I need people. Not, like I said, not everybody has to be a warrior. And that's something that's always been difficult to understand whenever I've been creating groups. Everybody thinks they have to be this Superman warrior that can do this. You need to have this 70-year-old lady in the group who needs assistance with everything. If she can lay on the ground, put her index finger on a trigger and look through a scope on a rifle that's attached to a bipod, or through a window and do the same, she's valuable in the group, even in fighting aspects. She doesn't have to be a warrior in the group. The nurturers need to have the ability to augment, almost like an auxiliary unit, if need be. And that's just the fact of protecting the homestead. The same way the warriors need to have an understanding of at least I need to know how to at least plant some shit. I need to know how to gather water. You have to be somewhat in a specialized position, but at least have minor knowledge in other aspects. This also becomes important to understanding where people in the group need to teach others. That said, there's no reason that 70-year-old lady should not be teaching these skills to younger people, to younger generations. So she has to understand at 70 years old in a grid down situation that her level of survival is significantly lower than everyone else in the group who's younger, especially that 28-year-old guy. So she needs to be teaching. This is where I believe that MC refers to it as the shamans of the group, the teachers, those people who are teaching others the ways how to survive. So both are going to be equally important, because you're not going to have a one type of person in your group. If you've got one type of person in your group, it's going to be no good. You've got to have women in the group. You have to have women that can fight. You have to have women that can teach people to fight. This is one thing in one of the groups that I was trying to put forth that a lot of the women in the group especially didn't really get. My wife is very much a nurturer, but she's also very much a fighter as well. Other women in the group were not. And they took it as that they had to live up to that standard of being able to fight and nurture. But that's not the case. My wife trained with the men because she had the capabilities of doing the exact same things that we were doing. She was not given a free pass just because she was my wife. If she couldn't keep up, guess what? Sorry, honey, you're going to have to go back to the house there and help the ladies out. That's not being some kind of misogynist ass. That's just being realistic. And she would expect me to treat her that way if that were the case. But the women in the group just couldn't seem to figure that out. They wanted to, they're like, well, I don't want to train. I don't want to have to learn to fight. I don't want to have to learn to do this. But then at the same time, they get insulted when we say, well, if you're not going to fight, you at least need to have food ready for the warriors when they return from training. Oh, that's misogynist. And we're not just like, well, what good are you then? You're nothing. You're like having a chihuahua as a survival pet. What am I supposed to do with a chihuahua? I have to take care of it the whole time. It doesn't do anything. The only thing it's going to be good for is maybe a meal later. Okay? A small one at that. So, the women in the group, or even the weak men, I've had some weak-ass men who wanted to be part of a group before that I was a part of when I lived in Colombia. I had a group of men there who wanted to hang with me and everything, and we want to be. But there were some weak guys in that group, and you know what they did? Their role was not with that of the warriors because they could not hang. Their job was helping with more physical tasks back at the homestead. And there's nothing wrong. That is not a degraded position. That is simply your position. And that is the best way you're helping, because this is a symbiotic relationship. The warriors help protect the nurturers. The nurturers keep the warriors nurtured. It's a symbiotic relationship. If one does not have the other, the tribe cannot survive. It's very simple. The nurturers also they have to understand that their role is also training that next generation, just as I talked about the 70-year-old lady. Their job is training that next generation to become the next nurturers, to become the warriors are teaching those next warriors in line. All this is an important role. No position is less valuable than the other. So my friends, we're going to do this again. You better believe we're going to do this again. If you like this, please let me know, because this opens up a lot of dialogue, a lot of talk about how we can do things in our groups, especially if you're talking about groups that you're looking to build a new generation with, a new nation within a nation, a barbarian tribe of men with their own set of rituals, rules, and just things that they do in general. These are the types of questions you need to ask, because you start to understand the people in your group. And I urge you, if you have a group, sit them down and listen to this episode and pause it in between each question and see what your people would do. You'll learn a lot about the people you're with. Learn where their mind's at. Are they looking for somebody to take care of them? Are they looking to have a leadership position? Do they get conflicted in some of these questions? This is all a wonderful conversation that we can have with our people to understand where they're coming from. So, I guess that would be our last call, wouldn't it? I didn't say last call, but that's the last call. So last call, you guys, get your shit together. It's time to head out. So I hope everybody enjoyed this, so you really get a good idea of what it's like to really run scenarios through your head and really ask yourself the tough questions. And I've talked about this in the martial mastery episode. I've probably talked about asking tough questions in a lot of episodes. Throughout history, good solid leaders, good solid tribes were always able to make this level of distinction between what gets them conflicted and what doesn't. For some people, these questions may be easy. For some, they're hard. But it's excellent to understand the type of mindset you're surrounding yourself with. But for now, my friends, the lounge is closed.